Tech Cocktail Sessions, educational and inspirational talks from experienced startup founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders.
Thank you all for coming out tonight. I'm Frank Gruber, the co-founder and CEO of Tech Cocktail. We're a media company that covers tech startups around the country. We do events that showcase startups. We do speaker series style events that hope to educate entrepreneurs and people that are trying to start and run businesses. We also work with different companies. Oh, got some darkness. Nice. We also work with different organizations. Super excited to be working with Cars.com here in Chicago. There you go. Yeah, it's here for Cars. This is their speaker series. They do it every quarter, and we're working with them on that. And more lights. What else are you throwing at me? And so we're super excited to be working with them here and doing this series. This is our third one this year. We've got one more coming up December 4th. We'll be announcing the speaker for that later tonight. Before we get started, I want to thank a few people. I want to say, first off, thanks to Cars.com. Apartments.com is back there as well. After this speaker-style event, we'll break it out into more of a cocktail-style event where we have our startups around the room. Before we do that, though, we'll be voting on the hottest startup. So we've been touring the country now since January, covering in the different areas around the country in 35 cities and showcasing startups and trying to find the hottest startups. And so the ones that we find and qualify, we end up qualifying to come to our national culmination event, which is coming up October 23rd through 25th in Las Vegas. It's called Tech Cocktail Celebrate, and there'll be a bunch of companies from all over the country competing for the hottest startup. There'll also be some speakers, there's a hackathon, there's a lot of stuff going on. And then it's the 2 days before a new festival called Life is Beautiful, which is going to be a combination of music. We've got Kings of Leon and the Killers and Vampire Weekend, and as well as culinary, a lot of the top culinary chefs from around the country. They also have a lot of art and entertainment, like all the Cirque du Soleil acts will be performing downtown Vegas. So that's happening that weekend. So we decided to put our stuff right before it, so you come celebrate and stay because life is beautiful. So, no pun intended. So I also want to thank some of our other partners, community partners like Saper Law here in Chicago, FR&R Accounting, they do our taxes and keep us out of trouble. Genexus USA, they're a dev shop as well. .co, American Airlines, and of course 1871 offers this great venue for us to get together. So really appreciate all the support from the community. And with that, I want to introduce to you the CTO of Cars.com, Kevin Steele. He's going to come and welcome you and share some details about what's going on tonight. So let's hear for Kevin.
Thanks. Good evening. I'll be quick. I'll be very quick. First of all, I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. This is our 8th speaker series event, our 2nd year working with Tech Cocktail. So we've been enjoying it. Hopefully you enjoy the speakers we've been bringing, and you'll come join us December 4th. I think Frank mentioned he's going to announce the speaker a little later, but make sure you come back out and join us. Tonight we've got Harper Reed, who is a former CTO of Obama for America and Threadless.com. We're really proud and happy to have him here tonight. So I'm not going to spend much more time. Without further ado, thanks to Harper. Come on up. Thanks.
Hello. So let me see if I do this. If I stand in the middle, apparently I block all the slides. So let's see how this goes. So let's see. Does it work? Yeah, it does. Good. So the last time I saw everyone here, I think was 2010. I looked like that, so I had a little different facial hair configuration. And I talked about roughly the same stuff, but I've kind of expanded it. But during that time when I showed up, I remember I showed up and a friend of mine who was my co-presenter at the time was just hit by a bike. You remember that? And we actually had a picture of him in the presentation in the hospital. And it was like, remember to wear your helmet. That was the message. So do that. Remember to wear your helmet. But I was lost, and a lot of things have changed since then. But I kind of wanted to go through some of the big ones here. So during that time, I went on a vision quest, and I think Chicago kind of did as well. In 2010, 2009, it kind of sucked to do startups here. It wasn't fun. It was hard. All these things have changed, though. We have 1871, right? This is pretty awesome. We're here today at this giant space. You walk around out there, there's all these great startups. Who here is currently in 1871 every day? Really? There's only like 2 people? So anyway, you guys should check it out. It's really cool. The next thing is obviously Tech Cocktail. I met Frank, what year? 2006. That was, I think, 4 years. I think some of you are not that old yet, actually. But a long, long time ago, I met Frank at Tech Cocktail. We were at a small bar in I don't even know where. And we just hung out. It was really great. And I mean, this is really exciting to be here so many years later. The exciting thing, though, is there's a lot of Chicago startups. We woke up this morning, we found out Braintree is being acquired by PayPal. This is exciting. This means that Chicago is shipping. We're creating products. We're shipping startups. This is what I want to see. And when I started this vision quest in 2010, I had no idea where any of this would end up. But luckily, I kind of found where I was going. And I don't know, you guys, we mentioned this in the beginning, but this is kind of where I ended up. So I'm going to tell you guys a little bit of that story on how I got there and what we did. So the first thing is, does anyone know this guy? So this is Michael Slavey. He's been involved in the Chicago tech scene for a bunch of years, but he was a CTO in 2008, and so of the Obama campaign. And so he was this kind of very good technologist, but largely like many people at that time, he wasn't an engineer. He was just someone who managed technologists. And so Michael Slavey is really great, but he hired me. So I love this. That's a really good transition. This is actually my official campaign photo. And I remember being like, "You guys sure you don't want me to get a suit? I can just go buy one." And they're like, "No, don't change anything," which was confusing. So I mean, the question really is, why Harper? And what is that's my favorite slide, by the way. This is another official campaign asset. It was on our Tumblr, and everyone was just like, and then all the kids were just like, that's what they did. So the question is, why Harper? And we got to go through 2008 to 2012. In 2008, the president was an insurgent candidate. We were the startup. And so we could do things. We could do things that were like, technology was put together with bubble gum and baling wire. Nobody really it wasn't that they didn't know what they were doing as much as they didn't know if they were going to survive for the next 2 weeks. So they couldn't invest anything. They had to invest in today. They had to make sure they won today. They had to make sure they executed today. There wasn't really room for innovation or anything like that. And in 2012, we were basically the enterprise. And so we had to build these really big things. And so Michael Slavey, when he came in, he was like, I need to do things aggressively different. We can't have this kind of bubblegum and baling wire tech strategy. We had to have real strategists or real technologists do real technology. So I was explaining this to my wife a while back, and she was like, "Okay, well, this is simple. You just need to invest in engineers." And it's really interesting when you look at the kind of technology and you look at how much it's changed everything. What we did is we really cut the E off the front of it. So we're no longer doing e-business, right? We're doing business with tech. We're no longer doing e-commerce. We're doing commerce with tech. It's all about what else? E-marketing. I wonder, a school once asked me to teach e-marketing, and I said to call me when you get rid of the E, because it's like, isn't it called marketing? And I think that's the world we live in right now. So what did I do? I hired about 40 engineers. This is pretty straightforward. I hired them from a bunch of really great companies. My favorite one, Harper Rules LLC. We got a really good guy from there. And about 120 tech staff. And really, this is pretty interesting because it's 10 times the tech staff from 2008. And pretty much everything was 10 times. And we had to do something that was really important because we started from absolutely zero. So we had to focus on one thing and one thing only in that 18 months, which was execution. And so we did this thing called, oh yeah, I forgot about this cake. So we got this cake, and a good friend, does anyone know Scott Vandenplas? So a good friend of mine, Scott Vandenplas, worked with me on the campaign, brought this cake in maybe a week before the election, and everyone was just like, uh-oh. Like no one ate it. Because they're just like, what? We don't want to fuck this up, right? Like we're really worried about, like, if we eat we're all superstitious. Like none of us are superstitious before the campaign, but while we're doing it, we're like, don't change your clothes. It was interesting. So no one ate the cake, and then we won, and then everyone's like, let's eat that cake, which seemed really risky, like a 2-week-old cake or whatever. Anyway, so we built this platform, and I don't know if you guys have heard of the platform. Anyone here in Narwhal? No? Anyone here heard of Reddit? Okay, I don't know why I asked that. But Narwhal, so this is a Jim Messina photoshopped as a Narwhal. We spent a lot of time having fun. This is one of my favorites. This is actually my favorite, him photoshopped as a giraffe. I think it's really important. And then this was his favorite. All these pictures came from our actually, every week we had a tech strategy kind of update meeting with the executive staff of the campaign. And because it was so stressful, we used a lot of these kind of things to make it fun and to kind of have fun. And so we'd introduce these every week, and every week he'd just be like, why are you doing this? So anyway, we were talking about Narwhal. Narwhal was this concept. It was actually pretty straightforward. We knew we needed to build a foundation to kind of build our products upon. And so we built this giant API because this would allow us the freedom to do all of the things that we needed to do to focus on the products. And this was kind of a very interesting way of doing it, because usually a platform is a byproduct from a good product, right? You build this really great product, and then the platform is kind of what comes out of it. You accidentally create a platform. Think of Facebook platform or Twitter's platform. But we needed to build a platform first so we could focus on the products. And the products that we focused on were like Call Tool. Anyone here volunteer for the campaign? Okay, so you had one person. 2, 3, good. More people should have volunteered. Anyone volunteer for the other side? One dude nodded, but I don't know if that's it. You did? Okay, good. Be strong. You could probably get a job there now. Are you a tech guy? You should. If you want to connect with them, let me know. I'll connect you with them. They're good people. So anyway, we had Call Tool, and what Call Tool did, it was really simple. Basically, you were able to go to the site, enter your information, and then we would connect you with people to call. So you'd actually make calls, and then this data would be exchanged in this really cool way. So we knew how those people reacted to various questions, survey questions, invitations to events, all sorts of really interesting things. And this was really exciting. We did millions and millions and millions of calls in the last 4 days of the election. And this changed everything. We got people out to vote. For some reason, Democrats are lazy and they don't vote. So we reminded them to go vote. And this changed the election. And we built some of the tools. We used vendors. It worked very well. The next thing we had was Dashboard. Dashboard was a really neat application that was largely, and I'm going to use kind of enterprise BS acronyms for a second. It was a BPM CRM or whatever. I'm sorry. Really what it did is it just helped our users connect with the people around them and help them do all of these tasks that we wanted them to do, and then track the metrics that were coming in. So we could have a good understanding of how people were doing, and they could tell us how they were feeling about what they were doing. This is really exciting because we could basically say to them, how are you feeling today? And they would say, well, today was hard. And then we could help them get through that. This worked very well, and we had quite a number of people on that. Mobile apps, we had a couple mobile apps. They were fine. But what's really important is that we invested insanely in responsive web design. Who here does any responsive web design or knows what it is? All of you should be thinking about this, because this allows your applications to use one set of design standards that hit most, if not all, devices. And so since our constituencies that we were trying to hit was roughly half the country, we had to make sure that we worked on every device that was out there. And so we invested heavily, internally and externally, in responsive web design. Contribution, we raised a lot of money. Did any of you get emails? Yeah, everyone laughs because yeah. So we sent a lot of emails, right? We did about, I think, $700 and something million in online contributions. That's a lot of money. The best thing about it is a lot of that software was built by very few people in PHP, which everyone said was a terrible language, and it just worked, and it was awesome. I'd love to tell you more about that later. Social, I think social is really boring. Do you guys think it's boring? I think it's super boring. What about big data? Who here likes big data? Woo! Let's talk about big data for a second. So I'm going to have a little bit of a big data. I think one of the biggest innovations we have is big data. But first, I want to have a little bit of an intervention. I'm going to call this my. I search for intervention. There's nothing really in Google Images, so I search for intermission. So this is my intermission. I don't know. So anyway, let's talk about big data. So the thing about big data, as I look at this, is the big, right? So when we say big data, what do you guys think of? I'm not going to ask that question because you're just going to yell at me and no one will know what you're thinking. I'm going to tell you what you're thinking. You're thinking of servers, right? And you're thinking of storage, right? Some of you are yes, some of you are like, what are you talking about? That's my point. In 2007, it was super hard to store stuff. So what did we do? We created this idea of big data. How do we store all this crazy stuff? And insurance companies, all these people were laughing at us. Ha, it's not that hard. And then we learned and we created software and then it was done. And so big data, as we hear in the marketing books, is like from Oracle, from Greenplum, all these great companies, is marketing. What we're talking about really is very simple stuff. Data to give good to have questions and have answers. And what I want to hear from you guys is not big data, but big answers. How do I want a conference on this, actually, Frank. I need big data, he's paying attention. I want a conference on this. I want to go to a conference that we all tell each other how we answered the questions that were hard. Because what we hear instead is we go to big data conferences right now, and it's usually just about how to store stuff, which I think is really boring and largely solved. So let's make this happen. That's the end of my intervention. So obviously the innovation was not big data, it was just regular data. And let's talk a little bit about this. So here's a simple Google search, and it's kind of boring, right? Let's make it more exciting. So we're going to change a little bit, add micro-targeting. Let's just zoom in there. I have no idea why it says nuclear codes. Like that doesn't make any sense. Oh, I think what it means though is that, you know, micro-targeting is super exciting, right? Like, woo, micro-targeting. Everyone's like, yeah, micro-targeting. And the media is just like, what is this? Well, it's actually pretty simple. We did some really cool stuff. So anyone here know Dan Sinker? You guys should all follow Dan Sinker on Twitter. He's great. But in 2008, he said this. And the reason I have this up here is because I want to show that nothing has changed in regards to amount of email that you receive from a campaign. No matter who you support, you're going to receive the same amount of email, which, as far as I can tell, is all of the email. But you know, we did some really neat stuff. So here's an email that we sent. This is actually an email that I received in my inbox. And here is the personalization. So it looks at all the previous contributions and basically says, how much money is Harper going to contribute? And then it says, oh, 56 bucks. And then I get that email and I'm like, bam, 56 bucks contributed. And then I'm just like, why did I do that? Math. Anyway, the cool thing about this is when you click that button, there's no confirmation. It immediately takes the money. So this alone raised us about $200 million or so. And people loved it because they were like, oh, I don't have to enter my credit card information. This is great. Click, 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 and they just gave us all the money. It was good. So we did another thing that was really exciting. We went ahead and put a little Facebook login prompt there. And we were saying, hey, why don't you connect with Facebook and we'll do some cool stuff with your email. And then we sent these emails. And what's exciting about this is I'm going to go ahead and highlight all the personalization points. So this is my best friend growing up, my good friend John, lives in North Carolina. And this email just says, hey, Harper, why don't you go ahead and tell John that he should vote? Once again, Democrats forget to vote. So like, tell him that he should vote. And then he goes and votes. But the thing that's exciting here is it looked at my Facebook. So I connected. It went through my Facebook and it said, which one of Harper's friends does Harper influence? Not who is this kind of BS general influencer. Not who has the most followers, none of this. In the small circle, who is Harper influence? And it found that John, for whatever reason, maybe we're tagged in some photos together, maybe he's liked updates of mine. And it really differentiates between the kind of creepy people who like all the updates, you know, those people where you're just like, why are you liking every update I post? This is really weird. Mom. And it differentiates that between the people who actually you're tagged with. So we can actually tell who is that person that you influence. And then it looks at the state and just sends you a simple email. What's exciting about this is not social. This is just email personalization. But I'm using the data that we all gather from these social connections to do this better. We did this with SMS. SMS I was really worried about. I was pretty sure it was going to turn out like this, where we're just going to take money accidentally. But actually, you know, it worked out really well. And we actually did it on New Year's. And I'm absolutely positive it turned out like this. I mean, let's be honest about how New Year's goes here, right? But, you know, what did this stuff do? Well, it raised boatloads of dollars. We did a really good job of getting all this money to come in. And using micro-targeting, we were able to better connect and better make sure that you would give the money that you wanted. Did anyone here give money? So the funny thing is I always talk about this, and people are like, you need to stop sending me emails. And I say, you need to stop giving money. Because no one does. Everyone's like, you send too many emails. I'm like, did you give money? I'm like, yes. I'm like, that's not negative reinforcement. That's positive reinforcement. So we also did better content distribution. We were able to get our message out more efficiently. And this is really important, right? Because it's very expensive to do this. And so being able to really connect one-on-one with someone is really helpful. We're also able to do better voter contact. The name of the game is voter contact, to try and remind people to go vote, and we did a really good job of this. But you know, the thing is, there's something missing. And I was talking to a friend of mine about this, and he was like, yo, you need to listen. And I was like, what do you mean? And so does anyone know who this guy is? This is a buddy of mine, Tim O'Reilly. Tim O'Reilly does a lot of publishing stuff. And I was talking with him. I was kind of telling him our plans. This is early 2011. He's like, look, I'm super tired of targeting. I'm super tired of everyone's fascination with micro-targeting. What I think we need to do is we need to invest in micro-listening. And of course, I'm just like, micro what? And he's just like, no, micro-listening is what you need to be doing. You need to be having a one-on-one conversation with every person that you're trying to reach. And now, if we go to a marketing conference, everyone's like, yeah, of course, that's what you do. You know, one-to-one marketing. This is a new thing with Twitter and Facebook and all that stuff. But the thing is, the campaign has been doing this for years. And so what we needed to do was enable people to use the same, I guess, technology that you use for targeting, to use that to have a conversation. So instead of just having a one-on-one or a one-directional conversation, how do we make that two-way? So we'll talk about a little bit of this. So the first way we did this was with voter contact. All those people that knocked on doors. I don't think that we probably saw this as much as the battleground states, but a lot of people knocked on a lot of doors. And a lot of times that information was taken back into the campaign, put into a database, and then looked at. So we could react to that information. And so this constant conversation, so every time you went, we would find out a little bit of information about you. You're interested in healthcare. So the next time that someone came to you, maybe they chatted about healthcare. Or maybe they were a veteran, and the next time someone came and talked to you, whether it was by phones or whether it was by knocking on door, maybe it was a veteran, because we knew that there was a bigger lift for veteran-on-veteran conversation. And so we did a lot of analysis on this to make our conversations better. We did this with Twitter, which I think this is my favorite one, and I get to use my laser. See that? A laser. But the exciting thing is we basically went and said, hey, who are the influencers of very small groups on Twitter? So we looked at who followed the president, who followed the first lady, and then we had them and we put them together and we said, who are they influencing? And then we said, okay, this is a high influencer. We sent them a DM, and then we got great responses back. So my favorite one is the one that says, feeling kind of special, or feeling special because I got a DM from Joe Biden. He's kind of like America's drunken uncle, which I think everyone kind of agrees on. We did a lot of asking. And so inside of Dashboard, we just kind of said, hey, you can see it kind of at the bottom. How are you feeling? What is your ups? What is your ups and downs right now? What is the challenge that you're having? This was a really interesting way for us to get a lot of data about how things were going. This was then broadcast up so that you as a manager could see how your people are feeling, what we could do better, how we could make things more efficient. And this worked really well. So, you know, largely listening worked, and the thing it led to was great. Our technology, I want to see if this works. So we did Python, Ruby, PHP, right, like everyone else. But then we also added all this other stuff. MySQL plus everything else. You can kind of see a pattern here. Does anyone know StatsD? Okay, good. One person. That person should tell everyone else because it's really the best thing in the world. It basically allows you to aggregate stats and then find really good correlations between what's happening with your infrastructure. I would definitely look into it if you're interested in any metrics-driven development. We use Puppet and Vagrant. We also used Ubuntu because we're adults. And then I like to, this dude's like, yeah, whatever. Red Hat's awesome. I like to call this framework the use all the things framework, because really all we did is we looked at it and we said, okay, how do we solve this problem? And what is the thing that is going to solve that? And we try not to be religious about that answer, except for Ubuntu. Our infrastructure was awesome. We use cloud. Anyone here into cloud computing? Yeah. Who's not into cloud computing? Okay, one dude. Is it because you're healthcare? Okay. It's like healthcare banks or they hate money. So we had about 200 products that we deployed, and this is roughly our infrastructure. But with thousands of servers, here's actually our infrastructure. So we'll go through and watch this real quick together. This is actually a real generation of our real infrastructure at the time, around election day. And we just passed one of our backups. So we're starting to get into, I guess this is east, so this is the real thing. You're going to see in a minute something's going to go by that's actual, yeah, see, so the staging and testing right there, those are complete copies of what just passed on the screen. So we were able to do this pretty inexpensively, and we were able to do this with only 4 ops guys. And so that's the power of cloud. There's no way that we could have achieved, this is also the slowest fade in the history of fades. There's no way, it's Keynote, right? So there's no way we could achieve what we set out to achieve without this. And so if you're not investing heavily in cloud, whether it's a private cloud or public cloud, you're probably doing it wrong, maybe, probably. So this is actually one of my favorite tweets that we got. This is Scott Vandenplas. He was our director of DevOps. And this kind of gives you an idea of the scale that we were doing. It was big. So we required cloud. Like there was no way we could achieve that without cloud. So let's move on to, I guess, yeah. So what I was saying before is this technology was very simple. It allowed us to focus on one thing, which was how to solve the problem. We didn't want to be religious about it, except for Ubuntu. And we wanted to make sure, I'm just saying that for you. We wanted to make sure that we just did the thing that was easy. And it worked, right? Failure was not an option. We invested in two things. The first thing was user experience. Any user experience people here? Okay. Those four people that just raised their hand are probably undervalued in their organization. The most important person in your organization is often the user experience person because they are the person who is talking to your users. They are the difference between functional and usable, and we often relegate them to the corner to do research. So invite them in and really engage them and think, how can I make sure that these are the right people? So we also did a lot of testing. And when I say testing, I mean we practiced failure constantly. And so we did all this crazy stuff where we actually destroyed our infrastructure for about 1 month before the campaign ended so that we could understand how things were going to break. And this was actually pretty awesome, but it turns out that the campaign and all campaigns are used to practicing failure constantly. This is a huge part of campaigns. And so we did actually 2 or 3 mock election days with over 10,000 volunteers that worked out all of our different problems. And it was pretty fun to see. I learned a lot. Election day. So we could do no more changes. This is a note that, this is a picture of an actual note on election day. Everyone was crazy. I learned the definition of frenetic. It was pretty chilled out. We just kind of hung out in my office, ate some cheese, you know, the usual. But, you know, the best thing is we won, right? It was awesome. It's great. You're welcome. Anyway. So what was the innovation here? What was the thing that we did? Well, the thing that we did more than anything was team. We collected the right people to make sure that this could happen. And this wasn't about technology because we couldn't innovate on technology. We could only execute. It was only about the team. So let's talk about some of how we build a great team. But first, you know, the thing about the innovation being the team is it's not easy. It's incredibly hard to build teams. Who here is hiring right now? Who here is looking for a job right now? There's like 6 people. This is not representative of Chicago. But the thing is that oftentimes it's this thing that we often stew on. And I remember I was in a conversation just recently on whether there are A teams or A players or whether they're both. And I think, you know, there's a lot of rules that we follow to build them. And so I'm going to share with you some of my things. So the first one is pruning. One of my first talks I did for Frank was a lot about this stuff. And pruning is the most important thing. And the reason is because a bad team member can ruin the whole team. And so you have to be ready to fire people. This is incredibly important. Who here loves firing people? The Romney guy. Surprise there. I think that was actually, you know, something that was a point of contention during the campaign, which is hilarious. But anyway, no one loves firing people except for crazy people. Sorry. And so, you know, Donald Trump, etc. The important thing is you have to do it. Do not be scared to do this because they will destroy your team without that. Who knows this guy? Right? ABC, y'all. Always be closing. Well, you know, that's important, but the really important thing is always be creative. Because you're going to be moving through this, and you can't just always be closing. I mean, you can't stop closing, right? But you need to remember that not every pitch is the same for every person. Like, why I'm doing something is not why you're doing something, or is not why you're doing something. You have to be iterative on that pitch and be able to change at a moment's notice. This is actually another one for ABC. A's hire A's and B's hire C's. My goal in life is to hire people to do all the work, which means they have to be smarter than me so I can just lay on the ground. That's my entire goal. So they have to be super smart. So I've always tried to hire people that are way smarter than me, and you guys should too. How many people in the audience are A's? Come on, guys. Gotta stay with me here. That was terrible. So the funny thing actually about this is all the last parts were from Rumsfeld's rules. I didn't know that, so I'm like, this is all really good advice, everyone. And then I read Rumsfeld rules, and I was like, oh, wow, Rumsfeld, huh? So anyway, you know, this is all about just hiring people who are smarter than you. It's important. So trust is probably my favorite thing. When you get a team that really works together, and you just trust each other, and you can just be like, oh yeah, he's going to go do that, or she's going to go do that, and it's just going to work out. That's great, but it's super hard to just develop. And so I don't have any like anecdotes or any thoughts on this is how I always develop trust because every team is a little bit different. But I'd love to hear from you on Twitter or whatever on what works for you guys or what you've seen in the past. Because trust, I think, is one of the most important pillars of a good team. Measure everything. We measured everything constantly, and there's a couple good reasons why we did that. And the first reason was because we wanted to be able to give credit. We wanted to say, yeah, Harper killed it, or whomever didn't kill it. I forgot all the names. diversity is one of the most important pillars of a good team, and this is something that I think is really important to talk about. I don't think enough people talk about it. We hear a lot about it, but there's not a lot of action. So I'm going to suggest a couple things. The first thing is pretty crazy. Don't be afraid to hire people that look differently from you, right? Crazy. But when I look at the teams that I've built, and a lot of them look like me, and I don't mean to. It's easy, right? You walk out there and you're like, hey. We have exactly the same value set. This is great. We're not going to argue about anything, and we come from the same place. That does not make a great team. That's not a place for innovation. Innovation comes from diversity. And, so there's two things that we can do, right? The first one is try. So that's my challenge for all of you, is try to do that. The second one, though, is a little harder. And this is the thing that I think is I guess we're not doing. You have to talk about the difficulty. You have to talk and admit that sometimes you're failing. We did not do a good job on the tech team for Obama's 2012 re-election campaign. For the most part, we hired all white dudes. We didn't mean to. It was easier, and they were available immediately. If we were to do this again, I would spend more time solving that problem, because I think it's important for your team to represent the internet. And the internet is not all weird dudes with red beards, I promise you. It's not going to get easier, though, if we ignore it. So we all have to be paying attention to this. And I challenge you, especially the Republican, to really try and get this done. But the most important thing is shipping, right? No matter how your team is composed of what they look like, who they are, how much they trust you, if you're not shipping your products, it doesn't matter. So who here has a product that's almost ready to ship? And who here has a product that's almost ready to ship for the last 6 months? Yeah, see right there, we got a couple up there. Hands start going up after that. Because the thing is we're all scared, right? We're like, well, if we release this product, people may not like it. Well, right. But if you don't release it, it's just going to die, and then you're going to have a terrible time. So, really, really practice that. Shipping is really hard. So, building a team is hard. This is a very difficult thing, but it's also the most important thing that you can do. It's worth the difficulty, and that's, I think, about it. So, thanks, guys.
Thank you, Harper. That was great. All right, so I'm going to start off with asking a few questions, and then we're going to open up to the audience. If you have a mobile device, you can tweet, and it will show up on this wall, my iPad, and we're going to ask some of the questions that are tweeted. So use the hashtag TechCocktailShy, and your question could be answered on stage. That's
good. I'm excited to hear questions.
All right, so first off, your slide deck.
Yeah.
184 slides.
This is the short one. So how many people know what Markdown is? Okay, cool, few people. So this is all generated with Markdown. Every line is a new slide. I have a make file that actually generates it into images, and I pull it in the Keynote. I thought I was super clever, and this takes way longer than just doing it in Keynote. So I don't recommend it, but I feel really special every time I do it. I'm very smart.
So it's 6 slides a minute.
So yeah, I usually do about 6 slides a minute, so I can actually estimate roughly how long it was, and I have no idea how long it was. Yeah, about 35 minutes, 30 minutes. I think it said it was going to be like 32 minutes or something like that, or whatever it was. And so, yeah, I have a very strange life.
So let's talk about after the campaign. After the campaign, you took a week break from the internet. Let's talk about that. Was that something you recommend?
Well, so how many people are addicted to email? Hands. Okay. How many people have a BlackBerry? That was a different question. I just want to make fun of people. You should get a new phone. The thing about being addicted to email is it's really hard. Like to get out of that cycle of reaching in your pocket and like checking, oh my gosh, there's something blowing up, and like, oh my gosh, there's something blowing up. And so we win this election, and the emails kind of just fall off. And I'm like constantly still reaching in my pocket, checking for emails that aren't there. And I'm getting kind of angsty about it. My wife is like, you need to get out of town, yo. And so I'm just like, okay, where should I go? And I asked a friend, and he was like, you should go somewhere where you don't know anyone. It turns out I don't know anyone in San Diego. Who knew? So I mean, I guess it makes sense. I don't know if you guys have been to San Diego. It's very strange. The weather is amazing though. Yeah. And they have cool planes and ships. Anyway, so I'm in San Diego, and I didn't have any email. I didn't bring any phones. I just went there with books. And so I just read books for about a week. And I came back, and the depressing thing was, while I was there, I talked to many members of my family, and they said, this is the first time I felt like we've connected in years. And I was just like, fuck. And it's because my attention is always on this device. There's a great YouTube video recently about this woman who didn't have a phone in social situations where everyone has phones. And you sit there and you look at this kind of interaction where we're all on our devices. You know, we're all looking at it. My favorite one is when you're in the back and someone's trying to take a picture on an iPad and you're just like, are you serious? But we're constantly on these things, and this really showed me how important it is not to have that. So I have really strict notification rules set up right now, so I don't get anything at a certain point, and then I sleep like a baby every night. Should try it out. Except for Snapchat, that shit goes right through.
It's like the bat phone. All right, so you would recommend that to folks if they've got a big shipping launch thing, something, any big.
I think what it is more so is if you are feeling like you're being controlled by your phone, which is kind of what I was feeling, like my phone was leading my life for me, then you probably need to put that away and kind of reevaluate what you're doing. And you know, I was at a good place to do that. I didn't have a job. I'm just kind of laying down on the road, crying because my friends were gone. And so it was a good opportunity for me to stand up and be like, okay, I'm going to check this out. So I read some really fun books, and yeah, it's good.
Okay, so you came back, and after just a week, did you dive right into the next project and get going? Or?
No,
okay.
That took a really long time.
Okay.
What I did instead is we started a company. So I have a company here in Chicago called Lunar Technologies, and we spent
mining the moon, right?
We're mining the moon, and we spent a lot of time kind of defining culture, because some of the things that we learned on the campaign, how important diversity is, how important like having a great culture, what are the walls and the parameters we want to work within. So we wanted to define that stuff really well in the beginning, and so we spent a lot of time talking about that and going through that. And I think we have a pretty good culture. There's only a couple of us, so it's pretty, it's good though.
Why Lunar Technologies?
It was the only name we could agree on, you know. So and it's the moon, and the moon's awesome. I'm super into space.
Moon rocks.
Moon rocks. I just bought a meteorite. I don't know why we're talking about this, but I just bought a meteorite, and I was really excited about it. I hold it in my hand, and I'm just like, inspiration.
Okay, so you talked a little bit about, you talked a lot about 2008 versus 2012. Can you maybe put your futurist hat on for a second and say, okay, what's technology going to look like in 2016?
I'm terrible at prognosticating, so I'm just going to say jetpacks.
I'm thinking in the presidential race.
Oh, right. Well, the only way to talk about this is to talk about the difference between 2008 and 2012. And in 2008, what we had was we had like people only kind of crazy hippie types like we have here use Twitter. Facebook was used by a lot of students, and Facebook pages were created for the campaign because the president had too many friends. The iPhone was out for about a year. Android had just been released. I think the first phone hit the market like a couple days before the campaign or before the election. All these things were fresh. The difference between 2008 and 2012 was that in 2012, our parents used all of this technology. And so what is the difference going to be between now and 2016? There's just no way we can tell. I'm guessing we'll probably all be wearing Google Glass. Everyone laughs. Obviously, that's not true. But I think you're going to see the convergence of all of our devices, our watches, all this stuff come together. I think we're going to see more and more Android. I'm excited about all of the people who are going to enter the internet as these middle classes and in these developing nations rise up. So I'm very excited about that. But what is the election going to look like? I have no idea. It's going to be exciting, though, because currently the Republicans have a tech edge on the Democrats right now. They have a very good CTO that came from Facebook, and the Democrats are just like, we're awesome, we did it in 2012. And the Republicans are like, never again. So how is that going to play out? I don't know. I'm excited to watch from the sidelines.
Okay, so in an interview recently, you mentioned that you took that on because there was big problems to solve. What other are big problems out there do you see that need solving?
I think privacy. I think privacy is a big problem. I see a lot of people nodding. All the people nodding are old. That's the problem, is that we have two types of people that are living in the internet. We have young people and old people, and I'm an old person in this. Usually it's people who are a little older than 25. And so who here is under 20? Anyone under 20? Okay. Do you deactivate your Facebook profile? Who here deactivates their Facebook profile? So only that dude and that dude. So this is the thing, is all of y'all look at deactivating your Facebook profile and you're like, I might miss out on someone's food pictures, right? It's a scary thing. None of us do this. Every single person under 20 deactivates their Facebook profile on a regular basis. So this difference in how we are controlling our data, I think, is going to be a really interesting problem that someone is going to have to solve. And I hope it's someone here. Facebook is solving it. But what we're seeing is more of like a general paradigm shift where the vocabulary means different things. When you talk to a young person like these two, and you talk about control and data and privacy, you're using different words. The words mean different things than when we use it. And so when I say privacy, that they just don't know what I mean. And a great example of this is Snapchat. Anyone here use Snapchat? Okay. I love Snapchat. How many people, when they first heard of Snapchat, were like, I'm going to send some naked pictures? Like the Republican.
I knew it.
Surprise, huh? But the thing, actually, I guess that's the Democrats too, huh? That one dude in New York. So anyway, the thing about Snapchat that's fascinating to me is most of the people that think that are like, look, this is something that we can send naughty pictures and whatnot. A lot of that is old people when they're looking at it because they're like, why else would you have a picture that disappears? And when you talk to youth, they've never had pictures that are permanent. And so this difference of how the properties of our various behaviors, the properties of our various physical items, and how we treat them are different by age. And we're at this point where there's just a line. And that line is around between 20 and 25. It's a blurry line. But there's a line, and this line you can actually, through a few questions, you can figure out which side of the line you're on. And the first one is about deactivating accounts. There's a great post by Jackie Chang recently on Medium about a project she did in the city here in Chicago, working with some inner city youth and talking about social and privacy and whatnot. I'd check it out, Jackie Twitter. And it talks about how these kids had an aggressive view of privacy. And for the most part, they were way, way more savvy than anyone else that she had talked to. And she'd interviewed a bunch of people. And in fact, they had a better handle on privacy than almost every adult that came in to teach them about privacy. And so I think that's awesome.
All right. With that, have you been tweeting? Have you been putting your questions out there? Okay, let's do some audience questions. I'm going to do some off Twitter, and then we can also do some in person if you don't tweet. So let's see here. Do you want to just pick one off the wall? Can we see one? Okay. Let's see. Okay, how about the first one up in the left corner there? Do you have advice for picking A team members who don't follow your mold, or follow your mold, yeah. How do you is
this a question about, I don't know, is this a question about diversity? Yes? No?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. So this is, I think, the most important thing you can do is invite someone else to help interview with you. So for instance, if I'm interviewing someone and a person comes in and that's going to push some people away. Because it'll just be like, you have creepy red beards. So they look sort of like me, I guess. But I think the main thing that you have to do, and a lot of organizations do this, right, where they make sure that the interviewer is a group of people and that you have kind of a checks and balances system. So instead of just having, we've all walked into this situation where you walk into a bunch of really hardcore tech type people and it's intimidating, right? That sucks. You don't want that. You don't want the first interaction with your company to be something that's intimidating. So invite people for that first couple interactions that are not intimidating. I think part of this is what we see this idea of getting rid of these hardcore tech interviews where I'm going to ask you a bunch of hard, like brain teaser type questions to show how smart I am. Let's not do that. Let's instead maximize on skills because people work in different ways. And sometimes you have a bad interview and sometimes the interviewer has a bad day. So you have to make sure that you're not, I guess, maximizing for false negatives, maybe. I don't know if that's the right direction. But yeah, I mean, it's hard. Like, I don't have an answer, and I'm hoping that some of you find the answer and tell me. And that's why I really try. I said, like, talk about this.
Is it a beer test? Have you heard of that test?
The what?
The beer test.
Would you have a beer with a person?
Right.
Yeah, but some people don't drink.
Would you have a non-alcoholic beer? I don't know.
So, I mean, would you hang out with them?
Yeah.
Yes, that's great. Most of my friends are white. So I fucked that up right away. Why doesn't it, I think it should just be, can they do the job well? Right? Like, why don't you start looking at, I mean, have a beer test. I think that's a great test. I use that for vendors. If I don't think I could hang out with a vendor, I don't want to have a relationship with that person. With that said, you know, I have a lot of friends, but they, for the most part, have the same value set as I. You know, we all live in Wicker Park. We're all weird hipster kids and all this weird stuff. But regardless of that, I don't want just those people in my company. Both because we would buy all the tight pants or whatever. But the real thing is that those people are not going to build the best app. The people in the audience here, I see a lot of people of color, a lot of women, a lot of people that don't look like me. We together are going to build the best app and build the best culture and the best company. There was a great post recently about how Google maximized for diversity early on, and that allowed them to innovate ahead of their competitors who had not. This is what I want in a company. I want to innovate and win. I want to make a lot of money, and I think the best way to do that is through hiring a diverse team that does not look like me.
Okay. Next question. I think my internet's hanging. Let's look up one over here. You see any over there? What were the biggest friction points during the campaign?
There weren't any. It was smooth sailing. We were talking about this earlier. I actually have no idea. I've forgotten. I think it's blocked it all off. I'm probably going to go to some therapist in 10 years, and I'm going to cry like a baby for 2 hours, and it'll all come out. But I really can't think about anything. I mean, there are obviously times when it was very interesting. The first debate, when the president killed it, that was great. That wasn't great. It was just, I think what it was is early on, there were a couple things that were said to me. One was by Jim Messina. He said, if there's not a metric, it doesn't exist. The second one was when I asked Michael Slavey, what happens if we get hacked? He's like, quick remediation. And so when you combine these two things, you're just looking at a very aggressive, iterative approach to everything. And so I think what's important to me and what I look back at and I see is no matter what was in front of us, we jumped over. No matter what was in front of us, whether it was positive or negative, we just iterated past. We didn't have time to sit there and think, man, this sucks, or man, this is hard. We just solved the problem. And so it's hard to answer that question. And the team was super awesome, the whole team, the whole campaign. And so there wasn't any really downtime. And we won. So as soon as you win, you forget everything.
So that solved everything. Okay, so would you do it again? Would you go back into politics?
Nope.
Ever?
Nope. It just was hard, man. I didn't see any of my friends for like 18 months.
Right.
I just met my wife for the second time. It was just, it was like a lot of our days every day for 2 years. Mm-hmm. It's not a very fun thing to do. It was really great to win. It was really great to interact with the smartest people that I've ever interacted with, and I would do that again. But I was there for the president, and the president can't run again.
So how do you compare it to, you worked at a lot of different organizations, tech-focused organizations like Threadless. How do you compare it to working in that kind of environment?
Threadless, we made T-shirts. The worst thing you can do with T-shirts is send it later. Like on the campaign, if you screw that up, like the world ends and we invade every country on the planet or something crazy. I don't know. I mean, I think that it's not, you cannot compare.
Right.
And so my previous experience helped me build the tech organization, but did not prepare me for what the campaign was like.
Right.
And it is incomparable. Has anyone here worked in a campaign? I mean, it's crazy, right? It's the craziest thing you'll ever do. And you're just sitting there and you're like, this is crazy. And then you have more pizza than you ever thought was possible. You stay up later and you get up earlier than you ever thought was possible. And then it's very rewarding. And when certain things happen, everyone cries because you're so happy and you're so excited. And it's really positive and it's really fun. I would all recommend it one time. The problem is once you've done it, you'll do it again because you're like, I did it already. I already saw the hard part. So that's my worry. 2016 is going to come around. They're going to call me and I'll be like, I'll be right there. So I'm saying publicly no right now.
Yeah. Okay, so what about just the approach? Like you approach from working at a company that was, started as a startup and you'd been around a while with Threadless, and then taking that and versus working at, on a political campaign with a different set of...
On the campaign, like you couldn't screw up, right? We could not fail. So you have to make sure like someone said to me, Harper, this is not measure twice, cut once. It's measure 1,000 times, cut once, which is obviously hyperbole. But the thing that we had to do is we had to make sure every movement we made was the right movement well before we executed that movement. And that was very hard, and sometimes you screw up, and so you have to quickly fix it. And so what we did is we just made sure we tested everything super aggressively. And like I said, if there wasn't a metric, it really didn't exist. So every time you had a conversation, you came with numbers that would back up your decision. And this is very difficult to do, but it worked.
Okay, along those same lines, somebody mentioned on Twitter here, you said if you can't measure, it doesn't exist. Is that a problem with not the tools don't exist, or Can you explain that a little bit more?
Well, I think the idea here is, let's say you and I are having a conversation about what color it should be. If you say, I feel it should be red, and I say, I feel it should be blue, that's a ridiculous conversation. If I say, well, the blue one was 10% more converting than the red one, suddenly you have actionable information that you can make a decision on.
Right.
So if you bring information like that to every single conversation, the conversations go super quick. You're like, actually, this one worked way better than that one. This page converted way more than that page. This is how we made $250 million with a quick donate. This is how we raised $700 million online, by just making sure every single decision was backed up with numbers. So rather than us kind of guessing, we're very aggressively metrics driven. At Threadless, we were very feelings driven, and it worked out super well to a certain point. But at some point, you have to really look at the numbers and you have to say, does this work? And you have to do it every single time. You can't just do it once and then hope it works forever, because users are crazy and they change.
Okay, next question. Let's get this one down here. How do you gauge the success of a social media campaign? What was the best way to build followers for Obama's campaign?
So the best way to build followers on Twitter is to become the president of the United States.
There you go.
I don't think we really had a problem with followers. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay. How do you decide what your next project will be?
Oh, this is really hard. We stewed on it for a long time. For us, we knew what we wanted to solve, these like big high-level stuff. We knew we wanted to work inside of e-commerce and commerce. So we spent a lot of time thinking about what inside of that really is exciting. And we settled on mobile commerce. So if anyone here is interested in mobile commerce, talk to me, and maybe I'll hire you, and maybe we can work together forever.
All right. I don't see any new questions, so let's do some.
Any questions in the audience?
Let's do the audience. Jen's got the mic
Yep.
over here. We're somebody right here?
You shout it, I'll repeat it.
Okay, Jen, you got the mic? All right, repeat it.
So the question is, can you make effective decisions when it's not backed by metrics? I think yes, you can. Are they as effective as if they were backed by metrics? No. No, I think it's related. I think that it's not related to politics specifically. I think that's related to making good decisions. There's a lot of organizations that have gotten very far by being feelings driven. And I think that this doesn't mean that you replace all your designers with math. This means that your designers should have an understanding about how to test their design so that they can build the design that converts the best. This isn't about replacing feelings at all. This is about using feelings and backing them up with math and metrics. Does anyone here know a business that would not benefit from being metrics driven? I guess I don't have to say anything more than that. Yeah.
Wait for me.
You're talking about metrics-driven businesses. Like, it's good to think about it in theory and strategy, but how do you go about executing that?
So that's an impossible thing to do. The hard part is moving your organization from being more feelings-driven to metrics-driven. The campaign, luckily, was from the very beginning driven by metrics. So everyone there was driven by metrics. So it was always from the very beginning that way. I don't have an answer on how you migrate an organization that isn't very metrics driven to metrics driven, because I've been in that organization and it's hard, right? Because you're just like, no, the numbers say this, and then someone says, yeah, but I feel it should be this way. And you're just like, like what can you do? I think what it's about is it's about circulating the data, giving it to as many people as possible, empowering the people internal to the organization to see the data. So don't keep it in silos, don't keep it in little places. Educate people about where the data lives and how they can access it for their own decisions. So that way you can have a conversation, and the best thing you can say in these contentious situations is, why don't we test it? Right? Why don't we just test it out? We'll do both of them and we'll just test it. And then that way they can say, oh yeah, because if they're confident about it, they'll be like, yeah, let's test it. Mine's gonna win. And then it doesn't matter which one wins, right? The winner is the best one, and the best one is the one that converts. So then you can get rid of the personality behind which one's better. And you can just be like, because the thing is we had the best email team in the world do our emails. Our email team was amazing. They were above and beyond any email team out there. And for the first couple months, they would bet which headline, which subject would win. And they lost every single time. So they never won. So what this says is the best email team in the world is unable to predict which email will convert. The only thing that was able to predict that was math.
Wow. Another question in the front row. Lots of questions. You got good seats.
With the expansion of technology and connectiveness of the everyday person, do you see less of a need for actual bodies, volunteers in a political campaign?
The quick answer is no. I think the campaigns are much like everything else, which it's much better to have person-on-person interaction. I mean, how often do you pick up the phone when one of the political parties call you and you're just like, yes, I'm going to listen? Like, nobody ever says that. Nobody ever is super engrossed when a television commercial comes on. And no one looks at any marketing on Twitter and is like, I am glad I got that promoted tweet. Like, that just never happens. And so, but if you pair that with someone really interacting one-on-one, a volunteer knocking on a door, a salesperson calling, whatever that may be, then I think then that's when you start to have a really holistic campaign. And you see this with businesses all the time. Like, I get these promoted tweets and I'm just like, what does this even mean? Now, if a friend of mine talked about that brand first, and then I saw that, I would understand what's going on, and that really one-on-one interaction is very positive.
All right, next question.
Would you be able to elaborate on what you're doing in mobile commerce?
Yeah, so it's pretty simple. We're getting rid of all of the anachronistic parts of e-commerce and just kind of throwing them away and making it much more efficient to purchase things. So, for example, the shopping cart, the catalog, and checkout are all things that were invented before I was born in physical stores. So we don't need those anymore. So we're just going to remove those and make everything way easier. I barely answered the question. What do you think of that? It's good, huh?
So you're done. It's just a page, right? What's in there?
That's actually pretty close to what it is.
Wow.
It's pretty nice. You guys will see it.
Okay.
Is there any amount of money that would get you to serve in the next campaign in 2016? You said no.
It's not about money. Like, you can't do something like that for money. Like, it's so aggressively not about money that that just has nothing to do with it. And I think that's largely on both sides. Although I will say that the Romney team did give win bonuses halfway through. But the thing that is important is if you believe in what's actually happening. And although I believe, the candidates just aren't there for me yet. And so we never know what's going to happen, right? Like, Obama he came out of nowhere in 2008. So we'll see who the candidate is. Maybe it's Huntsman, and we're all like, yay, Huntsman. Nobody knows. We need someone reasonable.
Okay. Got another question over there, Jen? No? Any other questions in the audience? Another one in the front here. Just repeat it. What are the driving factors if it's not money for you?
Belief and fun.
Belief and fun?
Yeah.
Okay, can you
If
explain
I believe
that?
in the
Explain
candidate,
that. Okay.
well, it's like President Obama, I believed in the president, right? So that's easy. Check.
So that's fun.
And then I'm just like, is this going to be fun? And I was like, yep, working with all these really great people that are super smart, that's going to be fun. My entire life is driven by fun.
I love it. So what are some fun things that you like to do then?
Long walks on the beach. Yeah, I don't know. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, there's some on Twitter as well. So if you can't find, here's one on Twitter. What do you do with Bs that think they're As?
You fire them.
There you go.
I mean, do you have time to hang out with people and work with people that aren't doing their jobs or aren't very good? I would say the first approach is to move them into a position where you think they can be an A. If they're not working out, they're probably not going to work out. There's a lot of really good kind of books and like information about this, about how these type of poisonous people in your environment can really hurt the environment. And someone who thinks they're way better than they are is probably one of those people. And so I would work on rehabilitation and try and help them understand where they actually are. And we've all worked with these people, and were they fun to work with? Did they help the team? Did they move the ball forward? No. So why are they on the team? It sucks, right? But that's just kind of the reality. And if you're trying to build the best team, then you need to kind of get rid of the people who are not the best.
Okay.
So be the best. That's the other side, right? Don't just fire everyone. You have to yourself be really good as well. And humble, just like me.
I think I got your business card once. And it said Harper, and I am awesome, or something. Is that about right?
The funny thing is I started this when I was at Threadless because Jake Nickel, who is the CEO of Threadless, had something like world's coolest guy or something, and he owned those Google keywords. So if you searched coolest guy, it was like Jake Nickel. So I was just like, I'm gonna do this too, right? So I was like, I am awesome, or whatever my website says.
Yeah.
And then every once in a while, it'll make its way into some media or something where someone will be like, Harper Reed, the world's coolest guy. I'm just like, oh heck. Heck. I say heck all the time.
Yeah.
Oh heck. Shoot. What will I do now?
Doggone it.
Doggone it.
Shucks. Okay, in the back here.
So to go back to the, if it can't be measured, it doesn't exist. What if it's a very important thing that just right now can't be measured? Like right now, you don't have access.
Like what? What's a good example?
Dark matter.
How many people saw a tweet that Obama posted? How many people did that come across their timeline? You don't have access to that data, but if there was, say, a correlation causation mix-up, and that was the underlying piece of data you needed.
But you could start gleaning things about that, right? You could look at retweets, you could have a link in it and see how many click-throughs you have. So you could start getting certain amounts of information that would give you roughly, that thing. If you're trying to, if you can't measure it, it's like, it sounds cool, but it's like, how is that going to help us? I mean, I don't know. I mean, we can play this game all night where you try and think of things that you can't measure, and I'll be laughing while your business fails.
Got another question on the right here, in the light.
So I still get 5 emails a day asking for donations, but it seems like
Stop donating.
But the Obama presidency hasn't used that list to send out emails on how he should govern or issues of the day, what his supporters think. And why do you think that it hasn't carried through to the actual presidency?
The kind of lame real reason is it's really hard to do things like that as the president because of all the laws that are wrapped around being the president. When Twitter came out and the president first got on Twitter, there was a lot of laws about whether he could or could not ask a question. So you can't ask a question on Twitter. That's kind of boring. And so a lot of the stuff is changed by the press office and all that stuff. But that's the kind of the lame answer. The real kind of, I think, behind the scenes answer is that it's just really, really hard. And so how do you do it? And so what has happened instead is Organizing for Action, which is the Democratic organization you're talking about, has taken up some of these issue and policy campaigns, which are long-term campaigns like guns, gun violence, healthcare, things like that. And they've done a pretty good job of it. But it's hard. It's just a very hard thing. And, I don't know. I think we all wish that the government interacted with us more with internet and with all this stuff because I think it would be better for everyone. But it's incredibly, incredibly difficult. It's much easier on these kind of city level or state level campaigns that we do see. We do see some good crowdsourcing coming out of city level and state level campaigns. It's just hard nationally. And that's not an excuse. It's maybe a little bit of an excuse. But I have no idea. I'm not involved with the administration at all. That's just my guess. What happens next? Are we drinking next?
Yes,
Is that why
we
everyone's
are.
quiet?
Yeah, everyone's very quiet.
Like, would you guys shut up? I want a beer.
Any other questions for Harper Reed? Okay, last question.
We can just talk later.
You talked about making a connection between social and using that to make better, more effective campaign or email use. Can you think of any other connections or that you had maybe done like that, or
between social,
or any of them, anything that you've done from around the technology, just all the different sectors?
I always forget to mention this, but I think one of the most important things about technology on the campaign is how technology was not innovation. It was only there to kind of be a force multiplier. And so this is this idea of everything that we did people to people that we used to do low tech, we just use tech to make it better, 20 times better, 10 times better. The idea is that if you can make a volunteer's time, which is giving all their time, you can make that 60 hours of volunteer time worth 100 hours. That's better. And so everything we did was about how do we use this as a force multiplier. So social was just a force multiplier to get more people to reach out, to connect with their friends. Email was just a force multiplier to get more people to give money. Getting rid of the conversion and using some very high-tech commerce techniques was a force multiplier to get more money in the door. All of these things were just about augmenting the things that were currently happening. And if you look at your business and you're looking at it and you're like, man, I wish we just don't have the money to do tech. Think of the things that you're doing people to people and how you can use a little tiny bit of tech to make that twice as better or 3 times better. And that's really what we did on the campaign. We just looked at what people were already doing and just made that 10 times better or 100 times better. And in some cases it worked, in some cases it didn't. Our mobile apps weren't that successful. They were really cool, they looked really good, a lot of people had them, but they didn't necessarily they didn't beat paper. Paper was the winner. And so in the field offices, people still use paper because paper scales, it's usable by anyone, no matter what the age is, et cetera, et cetera. And so, it's where using tech where it's appropriate and making sure that when you're using it, it's used as a force multiplier and not just for fun. So we didn't use augmented reality.
All right, I think that's it. So thank you all very much for all your great questions. Thank you,
Thank
Harper
you.
Reed.
It was great to
Cheers
chat.
for Harper.